I'm going to read this part on Noble Right Concentration from Life of the Buddha. So continuing on in this, and then there's a bit on Noble Eightfold Path in practice, and then we'll continue on with Luang-Por Sumedho's teachings from Four Noble Truths on the Noble Eightfold Path. And these next, probably about 8 or 9 passages are all from jumping around in Digha Nikaya 2, the Samanyapala Sutta, the fruits of the recluse life. And these passages are all found in that sutta, so I'll just read them out. Now we come to the 8th and last factor, right concentration. What is right concentration? Here, quite secluded from sensual desires, secluded from unwholesome states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first meditation, which is accompanied by thinking and exploring with happiness and pleasure born of seclusion. Just as a skilled bathman or his apprentice heaps bath powder in a metal basin and sprinkling it gradually with water, kneads it up until the moisture wets his ball of bath powder, soaks it, and extends over it, within and without, through the ball itself, though the ball itself does not become liquid. So too, the bhikkhu makes happiness and pleasure born of seclusion drench, steep, fill, and extend throughout this body, so that there is nothing of his whole body to which it does not extend. With the stilling of thinking and exploring, he enters upon and abides in the second meditation, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind, without thinking and exploring, with happiness and pleasure born of concentration. Just as if there were a lake whose waters welled up from below, having no inflow from the east, west, north, or south, nor yet replenished from time to time with showers from the skies, then the cool fount of water welling up from the lake would make the cool water drench, steep, fill, and extend throughout the lake, and there would be nothing of the whole lake to which the cool water did not extend. So too, the bhikkhu makes happiness and pleasure born of concentration drench, steep, fill, and extend throughout his body, so that there is nothing of his whole body to which they do not extend. With the fading away as well of happiness, he abides in equanimity and, mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body, he enters upon and abides in the third meditation, on account of which the noble ones announce, he has a pleasant abiding who is an onlooker with equanimity and is mindful. Just as in a pond of blue or white or red lotuses, some lotuses are born under the water, grow under the water, do not stand up out of the water, flourish immersed in the water, and the water drenches, steeps, fills, and extends throughout them to their tips and to their roots, and there's nothing of the whole of those lotuses to which it does not extend. So too the bhikkhu makes the pleasure divested of happiness drench, steep, fill, and extend throughout this body, so that there is nothing of his whole body to which it does not extend. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, he enters upon and abides in the fourth meditation, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and the purity of whose mindfulness is due to equanimity. Just as if a man were sitting, clothed from head to foot in white cloth, and there were nothing of his whole body to which the white cloth did not extend, so too the bhikkhu sits with pure, bright cognizance extending over his body, and there is nothing of his whole body to which it does not extend. But now, this is from Majjhima Nikaya 117, this passage coming up. What is the Noble One's right concentration with its causes and its equipment? It is any unification of mind that is equipped with the other 7 factors of the path. Right view comes first. One understands wrong view, intention, speech, action, and livelihood as wrong. One understands right view, intention, speech, action, and livelihood as right. Each of 2 kinds, that is, either associated with taints and ripening in the essentials of existence, or supramundane and a factor of the path. One makes efforts to abandon wrong view in the other 4, and to acquire right view in the other 4. This is one's right effort. Mindfully, one abandons the wrong and enters upon the way of the right. This is one's right mindfulness. These last 3 factors, right effort, mindfulness, and concentration, together constitute concentration. The eight, with right knowledge and right deliverance, are called the 10 Rightnesses, which constitute the certainty of rightness attained with the path of stream entry. Before leaving the subject of concentration, though, there are 4 more stages attainable called the 4 formless states. They are extra to right concentration, merely refinements of the 4th meditation. And then this is from Majjhima Nikaya 8. With the complete surmounting of perception of form, with the disappearance of perception of resistance, by not giving attention to perception of difference, aware of infinite space, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the base consisting of infinity of space. Again, by completely surmounting the base consisting of infinity of space, aware of infinite consciousness, he enters upon and abides in the base consisting of infinity of consciousness. Again, by completely surmounting the base consisting of infinity of consciousness, aware that there is nothing at all, he enters upon and abides in the base consisting of nothingness. Again, by completely surmounting the base consisting of nothingness, he enters upon and abides in the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception. The 4 meditations are not called effacement in the Noble One's discipline. They are called in the Noble One's discipline a pleasant abiding here and now. The 4 formless states are not called effacement in the Noble One's discipline. They are called in the Noble One's discipline quiet abidings. And then a quote from Majjhima Nikaya 25. And the next couple are from Majjhima Nikaya 25. This bhikkhu who practices these 8 attainments is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have temporarily deprived Mara's eyesight of its object and become invisible to the evil one. None of these 8 attainments, nor the 4 divine abidings, is claimed as peculiar to the Buddha's teaching. The practice of them without right view leads only to heaven, but not to Nibbana. The teaching peculiar to the Buddhas is the 4 Noble Truths. A 9th attainment, the attainment of cessation, is described as reached only in the 2 highest stages of realization and is thus peculiar to the Buddhas and their disciples. By completely surmounting the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the cessation of perception and feeling, and his taints are exhausted by his seeing with understanding. Then a bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have deprived Mara's eyesight of its object, and become invisible to the evil one, and, what is more, to have gone beyond all attachment to the world. When a wise man, established well in virtue, develops consciousness and understanding, then as a bhikkhu, ardent and sagacious, he succeeds in disentangling this tangle. And next one is from Itivutaka 24. Bhikkhus, if one man were to travel and trudge through one age, then the heap, the pile, the mass of his bones would be as high as this Vepula hill, if they were collected and the store were not destroyed. And this next one is from Majjhima Nikaya 129. The famous yoke and the turtle analogy. This is also big in the Tibetan tradition. Suppose a man threw into the ocean a yoke with one hole in it, and then the east wind blew it west, and the west wind blew it east, and the north wind blew it south, and the south wind blew it north. And suppose there were a blind turtle that came up to the surface once at the end of each century. How do you conceive this, bhikkhus? Would that blind turtle eventually put his head through that yoke with the one hole in it? He might, Lord, at the end of a long period. Bhikkhus, the blind turtle would sooner put his head through that yoke with a single hole in it than a fool, once gone to perdition, would find his way back to the human state. And from Majjhima Nikaya 22, Bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is frank, open, evident, and stripped of padding. In this Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, any who have simply faith in me, simply love for me, are destined for heaven. And then Majjhima Nikaya 8 again. What should be done for the disciples out of compassion by a teacher who seeks their welfare and is compassionate, that I have done for you. There are these roots of trees, these empty huts. Meditate, bhikkhus, do not delay, lest you regret it later. This is our instruction to you. And now we go into the actual, the Noble Eightfold Path in practice. This gets into Majjhima Nikaya 38 and 39, talking about the gradual path. That concludes the survey, but how is the way actually followed? Noble Eightfold Path in practice. One morning, the Venerable Ananda dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, he went into Savatthi for alms. He saw Janu Soni the Brahmin driving out of Savatthi in a chariot drawn by 4 mares, all in white steeds, white harnesses, white chariot, white upholstery, white sandals, and he was even being fanned with a white fan. When people saw this, they said, "What a divine vehicle! Now that is like a divine vehicle." On his return, the Venerable Ananda told the Blessed One about it, and he asked, "Lord, can a divine vehicle be pointed to in this Dhamma and discipline?" "It can, Ananda." The Blessed One said, "Divine vehicle is a name for the Noble Eightfold Path, and so is vehicle of Dhamma, and so is peerless victory in battle. For all the components of the Noble Eightfold Path culminate in the expulsion of lust, hate, and delusion." And then the next is a long passage from Majjhima Nikaya 38. Once a child is conceived, and with birth and the growth of youth, his sense faculties mature. Then he becomes furnished and invested with the 5 strands of sensual desires and exploits them. Forms cognizable through the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Likewise, sounds cognizable through the ear, odors cognizable through the nose, flavors cognizable through the tongue, and tangibles cognizable through the body. On seeing a visible form with the eye, hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a tangible with the body, cognizing an idea with the mind, he lusts after it if it is likable, or has ill will toward it if it is dislikable. He abides without mindfulness of the body established, and with mind limited, while he does not understand as they actually are the deliverance of mind and deliverance by understanding, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Engaged as he is in favoring and opposing, when he feels any feeling, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he relishes that feeling, affirms and accepts it. Relishing arises in him when he does that. Now any relishing of those feelings is clinging, with his clinging as condition, being, with being as condition, birth, with birth as condition, aging and death come to be, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That is how there is an origin to this whole aggregate mass of suffering. Here a Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished and fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and men, enlightened, blessed. He declares this world with its deities, its Maras and its Brahmas, this generation with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men, which he has himself realized by direct knowledge. He teaches a Dhamma, good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the meaning in the letter, and he announces a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. Some householder, or his son, or one born in some clan, hears that Dhamma. On hearing it, he has faith in the perfect one. Possessed of that faith, he considers, house life is crowded and dirty, life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy, living in a household, to lead a holy life, as utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shaved off hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. And on another occasion, abandoning perhaps a small, perhaps a large fortune, abandoning perhaps a small, perhaps a large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard, puts on the yellow robe, and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. Being thus gone forth and possessing the bhikkhu's training and way of life, he abandons killing living beings, abandoning therefrom with rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly, he abides compassionate to all beings. He abandons taking what is not given, abstaining from taking only. He abandons taking what is not given, taking only what is given, expecting only what is given. He abides pure in himself by not stealing. He abandons incelibacy. He lives the celibate life as one who lives apart, abstaining from vulgar lechery. He abandons false speech, abstaining, only speaking truth. Holding to truth when he speaks, he is trustworthy, reliable, and undeceiving of the world. He abandons slander. He abandons abuse. He abandons gossip. He speaks in season speech worth recording, which is reasoned, definite, and connected with good. He abstains from injuring seeds and plants. He eats only in one part of the day, refraining from food at night and late meals. He abstains from dancing, singing, music, and theatrical shows, from wearing garlands, smartening with scents, and embellishing with unguents, from high and large couches, from accepting gold and silver, corn, raw meat, women and girls, bondswomen and bondsmen, sheep and goats, poultry and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, fields and lands, from going on errands, from buying and selling, from false weights, false metals, and false measures, from cheating, deceiving, defrauding, and trickery, from mutilating, executing, imprisoning, robbery, plunder, and violence. That list is from also found many places in the Vinaya. He is content with robes to protect the body, with alms food to sustain the belly, so that wherever he goes, he takes everything with him, just as whenever a winged bird flies, it flies using its own wings. Possessing this store of the noble one's virtue, he feels in himself a bliss that is blameless. He becomes one who, on seeing a form with the eye, apprehends no signs and features through which, if he left the eye faculty unguarded, evil evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him, he practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye faculty, gives effect to restraint of the eye faculty. Likewise, on hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a tangible with the body, and cognizing an idea with the mind. Possessing this noble one's faculty of restraint, he feels in himself an unsullied bliss. He comes to be fully aware when moving to and fro and keeping silent. Possessing this store of the noble one's virtue, and this noble one's faculty restraint, and this noble one's mindfulness and full awareness, he resorts to a secluded resting place, to the forest, a tree root, a rock, a ravine, a mountain cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. On returning from his alms round after the meal, he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness in front of him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with a mind devoid of covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with no thought of ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning lethargy and drowsiness, he abides with a mind free of lethargy and drowsiness, percipient of light, mindful and fully aware. He purifies his mind from lethargy and drowsiness. Abandoning agitation and worry, he abides unagitated, with mind stilled in himself. He purifies his mind of agitation and worry. Abandoning uncertainty, he abides with a mind that has outgrown uncertainty, questioning no more about unwholesome states. He purifies his mind of uncertainty. Suppose a man borrowed a loan and undertook works, and the works succeeded so that he repaid all the money of the old loan, and there remained over some extra for his wife and children. Then, on considering that, he was glad and joyful. Or suppose a man was afflicted, suffering, and gravely ill, and his food did not sustain him, and his body had no strength, but later he recovered from the affliction, and his body regained strength. Or suppose a man were imprisoned in a prison house, but later he was released from imprisonment, safe and sound, with no loss to his property. Or suppose a man were a bondsman, not self-dependent, but dependent on others and unable to go where he wanted, but later he was freed from that slavery and was self-dependent, independent of others, and a free man, able to go where he wanted. Or suppose a man with property and goods entered on a road across a desert, but later he crossed over the desert safe and sound with no loss to his property. Then, on considering that, he was glad and joyful. So too, when these 5 hindrances are unabandoned in himself, a bhikkhu sees them respectively as a debt, a disease, a prison house, a bondage, and a road across a desert. And when they are abandoned in himself, he sees that as unindebtedness, health, release from prison, freedom from bondage, and a land of safety. Having abandoned the 5 hindrances, mental imperfections that weaken understanding, then quite secluded from sensual desires, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters upon and abides in the first meditation, the second meditation, the third meditation, the fourth meditation, as explained above. On seeing a form with the eye, hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a tangible with the body, cognizing an idea with the mind, he does not lust after it if it is likable, and he has no ill will toward it if it is dislikable. He abides with mindfulness of the body established and a measureless state of mind while he understands as they actually are the deliverance of mind and deliverance by understanding, wherein those evil unwholesome states cease without remainder. Having thus abandoned favoring and opposing, when he feels any feeling, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he does not relish that feeling or affirm or accept it. When he does not do that, his relishing of those feelings ceases. With cessation of his relishing, cessation of clinging. With cessation of clinging, cessation of being. With cessation of being, cessation of birth. With cessation of birth, aging and death cease, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That is how there is a cessation to this whole aggregate mass of suffering. And then to end it off, this chapter he ends with Majjhima Nikaya 22, the means. Suppose a man wanting a snake saw a large snake, and when he wrongly grasped it by its coils or its tail, it turned back and bit him, on which account he came to death or deadly suffering. Why? Because of his wrong grasp of the snake. So too, some misguided men learn the Dhamma without examining the meaning of the teachings with understanding, so they acquire no liking for meditating upon them. Learning it instead for the sake of carping and rebuttal of criticism, they fail to appreciate the purpose for which the Dhamma is learnt, and they find that the teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, for long conduce to their harm and suffering. But suppose a man who wanted a snake saw a large snake, and when he caught it with a forked stick and rightly grasped it by the neck. Then, for all it might wrap its coils about his hand or arm or limbs, then still he would not on that account come to death or deadly suffering. So too, some clansmen learn the Dhamma and examine the meaning of the teachings with understanding, so that they acquire a liking for meditating upon them. Not learning it for the sake of carping and rebuttal of criticism, they appreciate the purpose for which the Dhamma is learnt, and they find that those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, for long conduce to their welfare and happiness. Bhikkhus, suppose a traveler saw a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear, but there was no ferry or bridge. Then, after considering this, he collected grass and branches and twigs and leaves, and bound them together into a raft, supported by which, and making efforts with his hands and feet, he got safely across. Then, when he had got across, he thought, "This raft has been very helpful to me, since by its means I got safely across. Suppose I hoist it on my head or load it on my shoulder and go where I mean to go. Now would he be doing what should be done with a raft? No, Lord. What should he do with it? If, when he got across, he thought, 'This raft has been very helpful to me, since by its means I got safely across. Suppose I haul it up on dry land or set it adrift on the water and go where I mean to go. Then that is how he is doing what should be done with that raft. So I have shown you how the Dhamma resembles a raft in being for the purpose of crossing over, not for grasping. Bhikkhus, when you know the simile of the raft, then even good teachings should be abandoned by you. How much more so bad teachings?'" And then it ends with a passage from Samyutta Nikaya 43, and this is Suttas 1 through 44, but it's just like a distillation of those. And this comes up many times in the teachings, but it's always good to read it over again. Cessation of lust, of hate, and of delusion is the unformed, unconditioned, the end, the taintless, the truth, the other shore, the subtle, the very hard to see, the unweakening, the everlasting, the undisintegrating, the invisible, the undiversified, peace, the deathless, the superior goal, the blessed, safety, exhaustion of craving, the wonderful, the marvelous, non-distress, the naturally non-distressed, nibbana, non-affliction, fading of lust, purity, freedom, independence of reliance, the island, the shelter, the harbor, the refuge, the beyond. So all those similes for Nibbana. Any questions or comments on that before I read a little bit from Sumedho? Kristen.
What does the phrase "percipient of light" mean?
Like perceiving light. It can be. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It can be a mental image of light. It can just be thinking about light. Before you've talked about this before.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of certainly the most common way would be just like as a nimitta of light, but then there's also kind of a aspect of like awareness itself being kind of, as one of the epithets of kind of the illumined mind or the clear mind is that perception of light. So it can be seen on many different levels and experienced through different ways. Main thing is the actual, I think the kind of attending to clarity and a kind of an energetic quality of the mind that is uplifted and clear.
I had a question. There was at the beginning of the reading, there was like a sutta quote that I was surprised by. It was like something about one who has faith in the Buddha goes to heaven. I'm wondering like what sutta that's from, or if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, no, that's he's like at the very least. So like that's Majjhima Nikaya 22. His Dhamma is well proclaimed by me, frank, stripped of patchwork. In this Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, and who have simply faith in me, simply love for me, are destined for heaven. I think he's saying like the bare minimum, like if they like even if you, like as a layperson, or even if you have faith. If Longpor has any comments about that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful statement that when one directs attention with faith and has a confidence in both the Buddha and the Dhamma that he's teaching, that because we tend to drift into what we remember is all of our transgressions and all of our pettiness and all of our misdeeds, and in reality, that yes, that's, we can obsess over that, but that isn't the real effect of the kind of confidence and faith in both in the Buddha and the teaching is one that the mind becomes extremely wholesome and that bears fruit in this life, but also in say at death for future lives. It has a major effect in conditioning of that process. So yeah, at the very least, one is reborn in a heavenly realm.
It's like one who really has faith. It's like keeping the Buddha in mind. you lose the plot or whatever, but you still kind of think like that's where your refuge is. It's kind of corralling you in that direction a bit.
For all of the ways that we can underline ourselves, that refuge is always there.
Just in the last 8 minutes with some more Lumpur Sumedho. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. Sila, the moral aspect of the Eightfold Path, consists of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That means taking responsibility for our speech and being careful about what we do with our bodies. When I'm mindful and aware, I speak in a way that is appropriate to time and place. Likewise, I act or work according to time and place. We begin to realize that we have to be careful about what we do and say. Otherwise, we constantly hurt ourselves. If you do or say things that are unkind or cruel, there is always an immediate result. In the past, you might have been able to get away with lying by distracting yourself, going on to something else so you didn't have to think about it. You could forget all about things for a while until eventually they'd come back upon you. But if we practice Sila, things seem to come back right away. Even when I exaggerate, something in me says, you shouldn't exaggerate, you should be more careful. I used to have the habit of exaggerating things. It's part of our culture. It seems perfectly normal. But when you are aware, the effect of even the slightest lie or gossip is immediate because you are completely open, vulnerable, and sensitive. So then you are careful about what you do. You realize that it's important to be responsible for what you do and say. The impulse to help someone is a skillful Dhamma. If you see someone fall over on the floor in a faint, a skillful Dhamma goes through your mind. Help this person. And you go to help them recover from their fainting spell. If you do it with an empty mind, not out of any personal desire for gain, but just out of compassion and because it's the right thing to do, then it's simply a skillful Dhamma. It's not personal kamma. It's not yours. But if you do it out of a desire to gain merit and to impress other people, or because the person is rich and you expect some reward for your action, then, even though the action is skillful, you're making a personal connection with it, and this reinforces the sense of self. When we do good works out of mindfulness and wisdom rather than out of ignorance, they are skillful Dhammas without personal kamma. The monastic order was established by the Buddha so that men and women could live an impeccable life which is completely blameless. As a bhikkhu, you live within a whole system of training precepts called the Patimokkha discipline. When you live under this discipline, even if your actions or speech are heedless, at least they don't leave strong impressions. You can't have money, so you're not able to just go anywhere until you're invited. You are celibate. Since you live on alms food, you're not killing any animals. You don't even pick flowers or leaves or do any kind of action that would disturb the natural flow in any way. You're completely harmless. In fact, in Thailand, we had to carry water strainers with us to filter out any kind of living things in the water, such as mosquito larvae. It's totally forbidden to intentionally kill things. I have been living under this rule for 25 years. This is a very old talk. I think it's 55 more now. I have been living under this rule for 25 years now, so I haven't really done any heavy comic actions. Under this discipline, one lives in a very harmless, very responsible way. Perhaps the most difficult part is with speech. Speech habits are the most difficult to break and let go of, but they can also improve. By reflection and contemplation, one begins to see the unpleasantness of saying foolish things, or just babbling or chatting away for no good reason. For lay people, right livelihood is something that is developed as you come to know your intentions for what you do. You can try to avoid deliberately harming other creatures or earning a living in a harmful unkind way. You can also try to avoid livelihood which may cause other people to become addicted to drugs or drink, or which might endanger the ecological balance of the planet. So these three, right action, right speech, and right livelihood, follow from right understanding or perfect knowing. We begin to feel that we want to live in a way that is a blessing to the planet, or at least that does not harm it. Right understanding and right aspiration have a definite influence on what we do and say. So panya, or wisdom, leads to sila, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Sila refers to our speech and actions. With sila, we contain the sexual drive or the violent use of the body. We do not use it for killing or stealing. In this way, panya and sila work together in perfect harmony. Right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration refer to your spirit, your heart. When we think of the spirit, we point to the center of the chest, to the heart. So we have panya, the head, sila, the body, and samadhi, the heart. You can use your own body as a kind of chart, a symbol of the Eightfold Path. These three are integrated, working together for realization and supporting each other like a tripod. One is not dominating the other and exploiting or rejecting anything. They work together. The wisdom from right understanding and right intention, then morality, which is right speech, right action, and right livelihood, and right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The balanced, equanimous mind, emotional serenity. Serenity is where the emotions are balanced, supporting each other. They're not going up and down. There's a sense of bliss, of serenity. There is perfect harmony between the intellect, the instincts, and the emotions. They're mutually supportive, helping each other. They're no longer conflicting or taking us to extremes, and because of that, we begin to feel a tremendous peacefulness in our minds. There is a sense of ease and fearlessness coming from the Eightfold Path, a sense of equanimity and emotional balance. We feel at ease rather than that sense of anxiety, that tension and emotional conflict. There is clarity, there is peacefulness, stillness, knowing. This insight of the Eightfold Path should be developed. This is bhavana. We use the word bhavana to signify development. Okay, I'll leave it there for today. It's 10:30.